Hi guys, so today we'll be talking about parangs, and this is a very much an Asian chopping tool similar to the machete, but it is more localized to Malaysia, Indonesia and the region, parts of Borneo and all that have their own typical types of parang, which is very much unique to their local use, the natives and all that. And this is one of them. This is a duku chandong kind of style, and you will find many different kinds. The golo is very much from Indonesia, if I'm not mistaken. It's it looks like a Bowie knife more than this kind of design. But what you can see here, the chandong at least, is a very efficient chopping tool, and its characteristic, it has an upward pointing tang, and the tip, you can find some of them are pointed, but this is basically a sheep's foot kind of tip. It goes straight and then it curves down, and some natives even use it as a digging tool. So it's a very versatile and very efficient tool because it is not super heavy, but it does have some weight in the spine, which enables it to chop through bamboo and vines and all that with a lot of ease, and it's quite efficient actually. So a couple of things. First off, if you want to pronounce it properly, I know it's a lot of Westerners call it parang or some variant of that. This is a parang. That's at least how it's pronounced locally, and so if you want to be true to its name, it's parang, not parang. So that's the first thing, the word pronunciation. Second thing, I notice some and increasingly more cottage knife smiths and all that are making it. They're making it a full tang. There's actually a reason behind the rat tail here, and if you make it full tang, it becomes more like a machete. The history behind having a rat tail tang is because this knife is very much a jungle survival, daily use, no home support kind of tool. It was conceived and it evolved in a situation where it had to be 100% field usable and field repairable. So once the blade got forged, and this is a hand forged blade, it always had a rat tail tang, and the reason is because we use wooden handles typically, and nowadays they are sometimes pinned. But if you look at the natives, when they make their parangs and they take it out into the field, they don't even have a pin. It's because there's two ways to mount a parang in the handle. One is in the old days, and still some do it. It's a lot more work, but they still do it. They would get a log of specific wood. Some of them use, I can't remember, it's a tree root of some sorts. I'll put a name up here if I can get it. So basically they'll get an oversized log, about a tree root or a specific branch of about that size, and they would then, if they had a metal ring, they would locate the metal ring in the middle of that log, and they would hammer that into the log. Once the ring is embedded in the large log, they would then place the rat tail in the middle of that ring, and the wood would still be solid, full inside, and they would start to hammer the assembly down. And because of the weight of the blade, the rat tail would slowly embed itself into the handle all the way down to basically the point where you want to stop. Some of them have notches, some of them don't, but most of them do have notches. Some of them even have little jagged bits on the rat tail to bite into the wood. And once that was fully embedded, then they would slowly trim off the wood and form the handle. That's what we used to do in the old days and what some people do now. And for the more commercial, I guess, or slightly more modern way of mounting, you would get a handle like this. This is Surian wood. We'll talk about a little bit more about it later. And they would basically embed the ring around it. This is epoxied in, if I'm not mistaken. but it's still an extremely tight fit. And then they would drill a hole here, and that allows the rat tail to get in and be mounted there. And then basically we will pour epoxy down here and just let it sit until it's fully mounted. And the epoxy would take the duty of transferring the shock load and all that into the wood handle. And it works quite well. And I guess the more utilitarian city folk, for safety reasons, we put a single pin into the rat tail to retain it. So if the epoxy does come loose, or even if you can argue that the hammered in style also could eventually come loose, and when we swing it, it could fly out. We put a single pin, that's the right way, into the end of the rat tail just to stop it from flying out. So you may get a bit of a loose blade, but at least if you swing it, it doesn't go flying and potentially injure somebody. But the natives leave the pin out, because if you have a pin in the system and your blade comes loose, you would need a punch or something like that to actually extract the pin before you can take out the blade and remount it. How it is mounted in the jungle, if we do not have access to anything else, is basically they use tree resin. It's a mixture of tree resin and some other things. They would heat up the tree resin, kind of like pack it into here. Then they would put the rat tail into the fire, not to damage the front part, but just heat up the rat tail a little bit. And they would slowly push it in, and the tree resin would harden, and that would be their fix. And then they would like pack in the tree resin around here. And that was the field fix. So a full tang type of blade is not a true parang style. Next is the metal that's being used. A parang is typically made from normal carbon steel, sometimes leaf spring. I've heard of some people using even bearing steel, but that's going a bit far. But it is definitely not made from any of these very modern, high strength, high HRC number steels, which are difficult to sharpen, and you need some special tools and all that. Because this is meant to be used in the field, we chop with it and all that. It does get dinged, it does get blunt in the field, and it is meant to be easily sharpened in the field. So the metal use cannot be too hard. And what you would see regular parang users and natives and our Asian parang users do was, if they are on a break, you would see them sit down, they would have their break, and then they would just hone the tip of the edge of their parangs, and then they go back and keep working at it. So it cannot be made from, well, if you want to stay true to the pedigree, it cannot be made from very exotic steels. It has to be at most just a carbon steel, which is easily sharpened in the field. So that's the second thing. First thing is, to be a true parang, it has to be a rat tail. Second, the metal cannot be exotic. It has to be just regular old carbon steel, which is easily sharpened in the field. Now getting on to the pinning. If you can see here, I showed you there's a little brass pin here. This is basically 3mm brass brazing rod. And if you're buying a parang, you sometimes notice there are two pins, one in the metal ring here and one somewhere at the back here. And the logic behind it, they say, is that to provide more stability. I mean, if you have 2 points, it cannot wiggle, right? It cannot pivot. But if you have a choice, and if you take my word on what it's worth, I would suggest not getting the 2-pin system. If you buy a parang, or if you handle a parang yourself, a single pin is better, because in a rat tail, if you put the pin in the metal, yes, it sounds logical because the metal enhances the strength and all that. You would basically be putting the pin here. And at this section of the rat tail, it is very close to the unsupported blade section. So any shock from chopping and all that still transfers very significantly into this part of the tang, and you will have minor deflection and all that through the flexibility of the wood and epoxy or resin that you have. If you put a 3mm pin in here, and this rat tail is a very typical width, you are losing about 30% of the rat tail material, and that would reduce the strength of this rat tail, and you may actually get fractures here, and you may break your blade. So the function of the pin is not to stabilize the blade in the handle. That's the duty of either the wood grain where when it is hammered in, or the epoxy if you do an epoxy pour like what I'm going to do after this. That's the duty of the matrix, basically, to hold the blade in the handle. The only duty of the pin, if you have one, is, as I mentioned just now, to, even if it's a notch here, it's fine, is to stop the blade from flying out if the matrix gripping the tang starts to break down or loosen. That's the only duty. So if you have a choice, and if you want one with a pin, get one that's in the wood. That's about it. I can't really say more than that. It's entirely a user choice, but that's the Asian perspective on it. But if you ask a true native and all that, they will not have pins in their parangs. The natives that are selling the parangs with pins are basically appealing to to the buyer's market, where they have a perception that pinned blades are better than just epoxy mounted or resin mounted or hammered blades. And that comes very much from the full tang mentality, where if you have the full metal going through here, you will see two nice solid rivets or pins going through, or bolts or whatever going through to hold the blade stock into the handle. But this is a totally different style of knife making, and the rat tail system has been proven for hundreds of years to work. So that's my take on it. Now, going to the handle, this I mentioned is Surian wood. It's relatively lightweight, actually. If you think for a handle that's supposed to take a lot of force and shock, you would think that's a real heavy, tough wood, but it's surprisingly light, and you can see the grain here. It runs perfectly straight. So this is a very well-made handle. From where the knife will be embedded, it runs straight out, and then you have a little bit of a bend here. Parang handles. There are some with a little bit of a design and a horn and all that, but I would advise against it, because sometimes you grip down at the end, sometimes you grip at the front, and that bulge or design and all that, which you see some parangs for export going to the West, made in Malaysia, legit, but the handles come with all kinds of flares and all that. I would suggest for a parang handle, go simple, go basic. There's some which just go curved, there's some with a little bit of a ball at the end, but make sure it's a clean system, because you grip it here, and sorry about the camera, got bumped. Sometimes you grip it here, sometimes you grip it to the end to just get a little bit of work done at the tip, but make it clean and make it just a curve. If you have something here, if you already have one with a bit of a bump or design here, I would suggest to take it off. You can also see it's not very wide, and it's a very simple wood. There are numerous woods which are good for this. Nangka, jackfruit. Jackfruit makes a really good wood, handle wood. Even though you can see a little bit of a crack sometimes and all that, the crack does not propagate, because the Surian wood is the same thing. They have interlocking grain. It is not a straight grain. So if you try to split this, it will not split like pine. It'll just go straight through. These grains are actually intertwined and interlocked. So that's what forms a very good material for the handle. I have a friend she's using a Surian wood handle, and it's been a few years, and he does not treat his parang with any... He takes care of it, but he does not leave it any quarter. You know, he uses it. It's a real user tool. And for the pin, you can use stainless steel, you can use brass. Brass is better, because once you pin it and the epoxy sets, you can hammer it down. You can cut it off and then hammer it down, or file it off much more easily. The handle of a parang should not be super smooth. This is, you can even see the clamp, jaws of the clamp here from the maker, and it's a little bit rough. And it should never be polished. It should just be wood and oil it with linseed oil or some wax or something like that. But actually wax is not a good idea. Some kind of oil, so that it just preserves the wood, but it keeps the grip going and the friction, especially when wet. I find personally that horn handles, yes, they look fantastic, but In a user situation, the horn handle, unless the surface is textured, is not a very safe or comfortable thing. It is a bit quite slippery. Okay, so that's the handle. So now going to the blade. This is made by a parang maker in Kuala Pilah. His name is Uncle Wong. I'm not even sure if he makes this anymore. I got this blade stock from a friend of mine who used to be dealing in parangs and used to mount it himself and all that. And he actually had a spare one. I was looking for something of this size. I got it from him just a few days ago. So Uncle Wong in Kuala Pilah, he doesn't use any hammer machines or anything like that. It's actually hand forged. It's him and his wife, if I'm not mistaken. And basically, this is entirely hand forged, allegedly from spring steel. And honestly, I don't really mind whatever steel it is. My friend's parang has been going strong, and whatever he's using, it's good enough. It's about 5 millimeters over at the tail. Let's have a look here. Yep, just over 5 and a smidge. And at the tip, he has hammered it down to 3 millimeters. So that's the thing, and I'll show you his maker's mark here. Maybe it will not focus too well. It's like this. I'll drop a picture on the screen. So it looks like a Mandarin character, but I can't read it. If anybody can tell me what it means, please do. But basically it looks like a hand. It's like 5 fingers and a palm at the bottom. So that's that. The pin is 3 millimeter, like I mentioned, brass or anything like that, or even a little bit, 2 millimeters will do just fine as well. And the handle is Suryan in this case. Let's have a look at the weights. Alright, so now this is the blade on the scale. It's 316 grams, or in ounces for my American viewers, if there are any, it's 11.2 ounces. The handle is 3.3 ounces, and going to grams, it is 94 grams. So the entire parang with the pin would be 411 grams or 14.55 ounces. So the parang basically can almost rival an axe in most duties. So it is actually a very versatile and practical alternative to the axe or the camp hatchet. And I think some people are starting to like this kind of knife or tool. So it's gaining popularity, I see. So that's, I guess, everything I have to say about the parangs of Malaysia. This, as I mentioned, is a Duku Chandong. And there are different styles, the Golo and whatnot. But one thing I need to mention about the Chandong. The reason why it goes up, I don't think I explained in detail just now, is because, let's just push this over here, and the handle goes in. The reason why this is such a good tool is that when you hold the Chandong like this, whatever you're cutting here, your hand is lifted up and away. So even if you're cutting on the ground, you can strike all the way down to the bottom of what you're cutting, and your hand will still not impact the material. So that's why the Chandong is so good. Some Chandongs are pointed at the tip. This is, as I mentioned, a sheep's foot style, so it can actually be used for digging, for roots and whatever. And yeah, that's why the Chandong is a really ergonomic thing. So you hold it sometimes for fine work. You can choke up all the way here to do some fine trimming, or if you hone this section really good, you can even make feather sticks out of it, though not very efficiently because the thickness of the blade doesn't really support that. But this is a convex grind overall, and Uncle Wong has done a nice job of polishing it down on the stone or something like that after that. I'll drop some pictures of the patina here from the forging process. This is the hammering process. It's really beautiful, and he's done a really good job of keeping it nice and flat even after the thinning. So this is not stock removal. He does not use grinding or anything like that. He hammers it down, and he still makes a really good job of it and keeping it nice and flat. So if you're going to get a parang, I would suggest a Chandong style, or at least something that goes up, and not a Golo. A Golo is very much straight. It is It looks really cool as a weapon and self-defense and whatnot. But as a user tool, I think the chandong is more useful. And if you buy a blade like this, some chandongs I have seen, they do tilt the rat tail back down a little bit, so the rat tail is like that. So then your handle will become more horizontal. And yeah, you still have the elevation of the material at the bottom, but the ergonomics of it, of a handle like this, because your hand is never flat like that. Your hand is going up because you're normally above your piece of wood. So handle that continues to go up with a nice curve at the end, well-made handle, really brings everything together. So if you are buying just a blade or something that's assembled like this, go for a chandong if you're going to buy a first parang and you're only going to have one. If you're going to start getting different styles, by all means, try the different designs. They each have their use case. So I'll throw a video by Paul of Jungle Crafty below. I'll put a link below. He explains the different styles of parangs that we have in Malaysia at least. And there are various use cases. Like, I think he mentions everything has its particular use, but some are better than others, and weight comes into play because in the jungle, tropical rainforests are nothing like the temperate region, rainforest, pine forest and all that. We have plants and things growing everywhere. So it's tough to get through. You need something that's really practical, and this is where the weight and all that comes into play. I've tried using things like the cold steel Bushman. It's a nice little chopper, almost the same size, and it does not really work the same and efficient as this one. So now let's talk about the lengths of the blade. So like I mentioned, this is 5 millimeters thickness, 3 millimeters thickness. Overall length of the blade is 370 millimeters or 14.5 inches. Cutting length of the blade is 200 millimeters or 8 inches. The part that you can choke up, the unsharpened bit, is 3.5 inches or 90 millimeters, and the rat tail is 70 millimeters or 3 inches. The handle, tip to tip, is about 170 millimeters or just shy of 7 inches. Fully assembled, let's put this here, a little bit over there. Tip to tip, we are looking at 475 millimeters or 18.5 inches. It's quite a substantial knife, but this style of knife, 12-inch blade overall with 8-inch cutting, with an 8-inch cutting section or sharpened section, is very ideal mid-ground. If you want to go ultralight and still have a parang, there are designs of chandongs which have an 8-inch blade overall, so it's roughly there. So you'll stop here. And these parangs generally come in at about 300 odd grams. Slightly lighter, it's about 25% lighter than this. So those smaller ones are if you want to go ultralight, but they do not have the chopping force of this kind of length. So once again, if you're going to go with a single parang to start off with, this is a sweet spot in my opinion. The bigger ones that have about an 18-inch overall blade length are significantly heavier because there's a lot more material in the stock, and that becomes a little bit heavy. It's good for clearing and all that, but if this is you're going to go through a forest or woodland or whatever and carry this on your hip, the 18-inch blades or larger are not advisable. I would personally not advise them. So get this as a maximum or the 8-inch overall blade length. So I guess that is my video for talking about parangs. I hope it was a little bit informative, some new information for you, and what a true parang is in the sense, or at least in the view of a person from where the parang came from. The natives will have their own styles, but generally this is what you see. So thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate the time that you spent here viewing it. Give me some comments. Let me know what you think. Do you have a parang? What type is it? Where is it from? We have a couple of really good local makers here. Bido is very famous, the one with the two swords. This is Uncle Wong. We have Fadil, if I'm not mistaken. He makes really good stuff. And there are a few others. But stock removal is not... Those who do stock removal, I do not consider them true parang makers, because by the nature of the blade, parang is always hand forged. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.